Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live broadcast where my awesome co-host, epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens, and I speak with people from all walks of the publishing industry. Lurking for Legends is a live interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests or simply make comments on what you hear in the show. So tonight we have epic fantasy author Josh de Lioncourt, and I know that this is called Lurking for Legends, but to me, he is already a legend because his writing is so awesome. So welcome to the show, Josh.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's so great to have you. And why don't we just start out with you telling us a little bit about your books? The series is called The Dragon's Brood Cycle, and you have 2 novels and 2 short stories, if I got that right.
Yeah, 2 novels, 2 short stories. Right now, working on the 3rd novel at the moment, and basically, the gist of the story is the main character is a high school hockey star named Emily, and she is growing up in Minneapolis, and her home life is not the best and has been deteriorating for some time. And her home life kind of comes to a head at the beginning of the first book. And through, I don't want to spoil too much, I guess, but through a series of strange events, she gets yanked out of what we would think of as the ordinary world and ends up in a world of magic and monsters, and that has a lot of parallels and what seem to be remnants of our world mixed in, and she's got to figure out why she's there, and the series goes from there, basically. And the 2 short stories are basically kind of exploring the backstories of side characters, mainly important side characters, but kind of secondary characters to the overall story. And of those, Treasures and Trinkets is my favorite. It's my favorite thing I've ever written, I think, and feeds in really well to the 3rd book in the series. So.
Yeah, I love that you have a favorite thing that you've ever written. If it's kind of, sometimes it can be tough to pick one particular thing, but I can see, like, I've read, of course, Treasures and Trinkets, and it is a truly brilliant short story. It really moves along well, and the characters are just really likable. There's a lot to it that makes it a great story. So, what about it for you makes it your favorite to have written?
It's I don't, it's hard to say exactly. I love the characters that I was writing about in that particular one. I think part of it is that it's the series as a whole is pretty dark, and it's a much more light story. I had a lot of fun writing it, and it was one of those stories that the characters basically write the story for you. Like I sat down writing it, and I had a little bit of a full start when I first started it. I was writing it in the 3rd person, and it wasn't really working. And I kind of scrapped some of that and started over again. Decided, the character, the main character of this one, I'm gonna let her tell the story. And once I did that, it all came together, and it was one of the fastest things I've ever written. I tend to be a bit of a slow writer, and it just came together so perfectly and so neatly, and it in the end it was even more than I had hoped it would be when I started. So I was very, very happy with how it came out.
So you got the 2 books in the Dragon's Brood series out right now, and you've got the 2 tales. And are the tales backstories of the main characters, or are they side stories of minor characters, or how do the tale stories fit in with the Dragon Brood series?
So the first one is called Harmony's Song. It tells the story of one of the secondary characters from the series. It's sort of his background, where he came from, and how he grew up, and that sort of thing, and ultimately how he ends up where he is when he meets our main heroine in the main series, when he meets Emily in book 1. So it kind of takes place throughout in the years before book one starts, and then the tail end of it is sort of the within a couple of months of where book one begins. And then the second one, Treasures and Trinkets, takes place at the same time as book two, sort of. So it starts out with the character that is the main character, Maddie. She's a character from both books in the main series, and it starts out with her traveling with a friend of hers, and they are traveling at the same time as the second book is going on. Her path is going to cross again with Emily's in the second book, but while they're traveling, she is telling her friend that she's traveling with, Gallic, the kind of her backstory, kind of how she ended up where she is, and she was both of them were prisoners uh, in a crystal mine, kind of run by the villain of our series, and she's telling her friend kind of her backstory and how she ended up there, and her relationship with a servant that she knew growing up. So it kind of fits in both in the current part of the story as well as a flashback to the rest of her life.
And just before this, we were commiserating about how it can take a while, to write the next book sometimes. And, we were both saying that both of us have been struggling with our next novel in different ways. And I have to agree with you, Josh, that, mine has been years in the making, which I never thought would happen to me, but that is what has happened. And it's like, kind of anything that can go wrong with a novel has gone wrong, and I've had to adjust everything, literally everything. So, what can you tell us about some of the struggles in, writing your latest novel? I think we can all relate to that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, some of it is just just life, right? Life gets in the way, and that's a tough part of it when you're trying to focus on a story. A lot of times, just working on this book in particular, book three, I've really kind of struggled to find I guess the rhythm of it. It's dealing mainly with kind of two characters, Emily and another character from the two. That are kind of the primary focus in book three, and trying to allow the back and forth between those two characters. They're in different places, they're dealing with different things. Get the pacing and the rhythm right between those two parts of it has been challenging. A lot of it's gotten written and then kind of scrapped and started over again because it just wasn't quite working. And it's going better now, but it's still very, very slow. And I think too, a lot of people can relate, I think, to the last year, right? The pandemic and everything else going on. This has been a bit of a distraction in all of our lives, I think, too. And certainly that hasn't helped. And it's slow going, but I think in the end, the book is going to be really, really fantastic. I had hoped that it would be further along than it is by now, and maybe done by now, but we're getting there. We're getting there, and I can't wait for everyone to get to read it.
Yeah, I think that's true for all of us. The pandemic is just totally, even though it's given us like more time at home, we're so distracted because of it that I think it's hard to actually sit down and get the words done. So even though we have more time to write, we actually write less. It's kind of it's like an oxymoron, I think. But so how many books do you foresee in the Dragon's Brood series? So this is book 3 that you're working on right now, right?
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
I said, how many books do you have scheduled for this Dragon? Do you know how many are going? Do you have like a number in mind? Or?
Yeah, I think it's going to be 4, depending on where I end up with books 3 and 4. It could spill over in 5. I have outlined it for 4 as we stand right now, but book book two ended up really kind of changing things. As I wrote book two, part of the plot for book three I pulled forward into book two, and that made book two end a little sooner in the arc than I'd originally planned. So I still think it's going to wind up being four books, four novels in the end, and probably a couple of other, at least a couple of other short stories and things. But it's possible it could roll out into five, depending. So I will also say, just sort of a little addendum, talking about the last year too. Part of book three has a little bit of part of the storyline deals in an environment that's a bit post-apocalyptic, and that's been harder to write in the last year. It's not been an area I've been super excited to venture into, but it's kind of integral to the story. So it's like I don't want to scrap that either. So that's also kind of slowed things down a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's sort of, sometimes you can look forward to that kind of stuff because it's so different from this world. But if it's too similar, it may not be. It may not
right,
be
exactly.
Yeah.
And when the story was mapped out, it was long before the events of this last year. So
Yeah.
I've tried to minimize it a little bit because I don't know even how much people want to be reading that sort of thing right now. So
right. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Christie.
Oh, I was gonna say, is there any way I can persuade you to write something more like 10 books in the Dragon's Brood series? How many can I push you to write? Because I really enjoy it, and your fans really enjoy it too.
Yeah, I've actually got another book that I have been kind of working on off and on for a few years that's completely separate from the Dragon's Brood cycle, and it's one of those projects that it's one of those projects I keep just kind of dipping into, and I read a little more here, a little more there, and I'm hoping that at some point before too long, that one may grab enough of my, or at least instill enough inspiration that maybe I really sit down and hammer the rest of it out. But it's a fun series. It's got supernatural elements like pretty much everything that I write, but it could not be more different from the Dragon's Brood cycle. So
is this the one that includes Western of some sort?
yeah, wow, you have a good memory. It's it's like a supernatural Western story. Yep, that's what it is. I didn't even remember that I'd shared that previously with you, so that's impressive.
I read a few of your interviews, so that's where I was getting it. I keep up with all the things that you do, so I love seeing what you're up to.
That's cool. I was looking through your website, and I found it interesting that while I was looking through dragonsbrood.net, and I clicked on the bio, it automatically switched me to lioncourt.com. Now, is that two totally different websites and they're just integrated? I thought that was very interesting. All of a sudden, I looked up in my my browser bar.
So lioncourt.com is kind of like my, I guess, author site or what have you. The dragonsbrood.net website is like for the series specifically, and it was one of those things. If I had it to do all over again, I'd probably have just had one site for both things. It just sort of worked out that I ended up with both. So, but
I thought that was very interesting the way they're integrated. So when you click on one, it just switches from one site to another, and it's seamless. Like I had no idea until I realized the tabs are all different at the top. What's going on? I thought I'd done something wrong.
Well, it's supposed to be pretty seamless. The site is kind of designed to have the same look and that sort of thing. So although the dragonsbrood.net has a lot of stuff that is not on the lioncourt.com one, like a lot of artwork of the characters and things like that. Right. That comic book artist friend of mine drew those and things like that make more sense on a series site, I think.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And while I was in there too, you also had your audiobooks listed, and I'm probably going to say her name wrong, but it's Rhea, Ray Kaplan is your narrator.
Ray Kaplan, yep, she is the narrator of all of the audiobooks. Treasures and
Mhm.
Trinkets just came out a few months ago on audio. That's the most recent release that I've got, and she is just fantastic. She is an amazing narrator. I got so incredibly lucky getting to work with her.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And the first teaser for the first Dragon's Brood book, there was music in the background. Is that just for the teaser, or do you have sound effects and music throughout all the audiobooks?
You know, I don't remember where that music is from. I have not watched that video in a long time. I know the music for the Treasures and Trinkets audiobook trailer was written by a friend of mine uh, and was based on some music that I'd written that's also features in the audiobooks as well. And the True Stories Harmony song has a song companion that goes with it, also in the audiobook, and you can listen to on the website that my wife sings. So there's a lot of music kind of all over the place in the series. I'm a musician. I record music as well, and so I've wanted to incorporate some of that into the series, and I've had a lot of fun doing that.
I think that's especially cool because, you know, I mean, the fact that you're writing this music and maybe your wife is singing some of it or all of it, or, you know, any involvement from the author on extra parts like that is extra exciting, I think. I find it really, really fun to know that it's not just something where, you know, the author listened to some separate music and was like, yeah, that fits. It's something from you, so it really suits.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I love doing it. I love the music part of it, and I mean, I love all that kind of extra extra material whenever you know any sort of author series or whatever has that sort of stuff. Is also why I had the artist friend of mine, Leanne Hanna, draw the pictures of the characters. She reads the series, loved the series, and kept saying, "Yeah, I really want to draw these characters." And so finally last year, we're like, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's get it done. We did, and I love having those kinds of things, the art and the music and the audiobooks, and I really enjoy all of those extra little things and the short stories as well. There's another indie author that I hugely enjoy. His name is Drew Hayes, and he is like the king of doing this. He has written a ton of stuff. In many series. I wish I was even an eighth as prolific as he is. He just keeps cranking them out. I don't know how he has time to eat, but he has done this where he's got several series. He's got side series, side books in some of those series. He's got audio dramatizations, like kind of like old radio show type of things, versions of
Wow.
some of the books that he's worked with graphic audio to produce. He has just done a ton of stuff, and I love that. I love what he's done, and you know, kind of wanted to do similar things, kind of follow in that vein, and get as much extra stuff out there as I can. And if you've not read Drew Hayes, he's very different than my stuff. His stuff is very light, very lighthearted and fun books, but they are and hilarious. He's an incredibly funny writer, and I really recommend his stuff. He's really great.
You know, before this, we were talking a little bit about, you know, there are so many things we sometimes have to delete from our books that sometimes we'll put them aside as deleted scenes. And I wasn't sure. I seriously do that. I literally do that, and I will give them to my patrons only. And I was wondering if you share deleted scenes anywhere.
I haven't. I have thought about doing so, particularly the ones that are kind of like, you know, the paths untraveled or whatever, things where I decided partway through change something up, and so I ended up with like a chapter or two that just no longer fit, no longer makes sense. There are a few of those from there. I don't know if there's any of those from book one. Book one was a was a I wish everything I wrote would come out the way that book one did, in the fact that I sat down to write book one, and yeah, I take that back. I think there is a like half a chapter it's from book one that got scrapped, and I got saved in my deleted scenes folder. But for the most part, book one is as it was written. I sat down, I wrote it in 3 months, and then did a ton of rewriting afterward because it needed it. But very little got cut from the first book. The second book, which was a little bit more of a journey to get put together, there's quite a few bits and pieces and whole chapters that just ended up on kind of on the cutting room floor. I have thought about sharing some of those. There's one chapter that is um, just sort of like a background chapter, kind of giving you some more information on a character that I just decided wasn't necessary, but might be fun to rework as a, maybe a little short story or something like that. I'm not sure, but I have not shared any of those anywhere. But I keep thinking about it, and maybe eventually, and I actually do have, as you know, Christie, another short story that I've been sitting on for a while trying to decide what to do with. So it's very, very short. It will come out eventually. I just haven't decided yet if I want to release it on its own, because it seems kind of too short to release by itself. Or if I want to tack it on to another release somewhere. I haven't quite decided yet.
So
Stingy
maybe,
Jack.
yeah. So maybe put these little short scenes into a little anthology through the Dragon's Brood cycle. That would be kind of a neat thing for the readers to read, all these little short stories in one book. Might be an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, I love the short stories, and maybe the Stingy Jack story should be one of those things that just gets kind of like you were talking about doing with the deleted scenes. Maybe I should just toss that up on the website or something as a something that the fans can download or whatever, and check out if they want. But I love doing that, and I've got a few more short story ideas. Uh, Kind of that I've been kicking around, and I'm hoping that some of those will see the light of day sooner than later as well.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of these deleted scenes and that, are you a plotter or a pantser then? So do you plot all these and then some just don't fit once you've got the story going, or are you a pantser and all of a sudden you realize after the fact that some of these scenes aren't fitting anymore?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Are you as a writer, would you plot your stories out, or do you what they call it? There's a nice name for it. I call it a pantser. I can't remember what I've seen it recently, but there's a special name for.
It's like a discovery writer. Is it discovery writer?
Discovery writer.
Discovery writer. Yes.
I'm a little bit of both. So the way that I tend to write, I think I want to say someone else. Maybe it was Rachel Aaron. I think there was another author recently who wrote about their creative process, and I was like, oh, that's what I do. And I never really had a name for it per se. I kind of think of it as like touchstones, but I basically have a loose outline that I have for the series and for each individual book in the series. And within those, I kind of just have like, these are what I'm tended to call the touchstones. These are the moments that I need to be working toward, and roughly in this order, although sometimes they can get switched around. And everything in between those, I kind of let the characters carry it along. And as long as I think we're still heading in the right direction, I let the characters kind of dictate where the story goes, and that works pretty well for me. I am not one of these writers who sits down and plots out every single detail of the each that for me, part of the fun of writing is probably one of the most fun things about writing is when the characters surprise you by doing something you don't expect or derailing something that you thought was going another way. And as long as I can keep the main story on track, I think it's best and more authentic to let the characters do what they want and be who they are. And I know it sounds weird to say that about fictional characters, but they they take on a life of their own after a while, and I enjoy just kind of allowing them to run with it. And yeah, sometimes that means you end up in strange places, and you either cut stuff or you have to adjust something in your plot to make it all work. But I've never regretted letting the characters take over, as long as they don't go too astray. So
That's what I was going to ask, actually. I was going to ask, what you said is absolutely right. These characters do take on a life of their own. And I also think that that is the best part of being a pantser or just in general writing. But I was going to ask, have you ever had a character make a decision that you were not thrilled about and that was either difficult to come back from or that you had to sort of deny them somehow?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there've been a couple of those times. I'm trying to think of trying to think of like a really good example of that. I guess probably the best example of that was in book one. Uh, there's a character who I don't want to give too much away for anybody who hasn't picked up the books yet, but basically there's a character who I had really kind of defined in my head that this is a for lack of a better term, a good guy or whatever. um and he does some questionable things kind of toward the end that uh I uh, wasn't entirely happy with, and wasn't exactly where I thought it was going to go. And then I ended up spending a lot of book two working out, where spent a lot of time in book two working out why is he where he is, why does he feel the way he does, and what does that mean for the rest of his arc. And in the end, I think it was really much better for that, because he's a much more complicated character than when I first envisioned him, when he first came onto the scene in the first book. So I'm pretty pleased with how that went in the long run, but I was not thrilled in the end, but didn't feel like it was exactly my place to change it. Right? They, like you say, they take on a life of their own. And I don't like contradicting that, because I think the readers notice if you do that either too much or too forcefully, and then the characters they stop feeling like people and start feeling like pawns that you're moving on a game board. And I really dislike books where the characters feel that way. So
That's a great point. They start to feel. I like the way you described it, like pawns that are moving around, and it can be even tough to sort of rationalize for the reader how they're doing or why they're doing things. And this is where you end up with rationalizations that don't always work, But you can also have wooden characters that just feel like characters, not like people. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
yeah, so it's been an interesting. The whole creative process is an interesting road to walk, I guess, because it's always full of surprising things, and like, a lot of times best laid plans can get get knocked aside, and sometimes, almost always, that's for the best. So
Definitely.
It certainly makes it exciting. So all your books now, I saw a comment there where all your books, you've got all your books wide. So you're in Apple and Kobo and Nook. At one point, were you just strictly in Amazon and in Kindle Unlimited, and then you've branched out, or have you always been wide?
So as far as the distributors.
Yeah, as far as when you publish your books, when you go Kindle Unlimited, your ebooks are restricted to Amazon.
So I have been in and out. So when I released my first book, I went wide, and then after a couple of, and I think it coincided with the release of book two. I decided to try, going on Kindle Unlimited, uh, and of course that requires exclusivity to Amazon, and I did that for a while. And that worked really well for about a year. And then it all completely dried up entirely. So about a year ago or so, I decided to take everything wide there again. And then just recently, I have been kind of experimenting with going wide with the audiobooks as well. So Harmony Song audiobook is available wide now. The other ones are still restricted to Audible and iTunes, but I plan on probably releasing the rest of those wide over the next couple of years. It's a little bit difficult right now because book one is tied up in an exclusivity contract with Audible that's through the end of 2022, I think. So, but once that kind of runs out, and probably with Treasures and Trinkets before then, I'm going to continue to put the audiobooks out wide as well. And I'm not really sure, it's a little too soon yet to know how well that's going to pan out, but in general, I'm a fan of wide releases. As a reader, I certainly prefer wide releases because I personally don't read a lot of stuff, a lot of ebooks and Kindle. I'm an Apple guy, and I like Apple books, and accessibility wise, as a visually impaired person, the accessibility of Apple books is much better than Kindle, so they're easier to read and such. So I prefer it when authors have stuff wide, but the business side, you got to kind of do what works for you. And I've kind of dabbled on both sides, and I think more and more I'm settling into I think the wide releases are probably the way that I want to continue going into the future anyway.
That's interesting. And I like what you said about the Kindle Unlimited, and it's probably true. Like they've got I know there's a lot of people that read Kindle Unlimited, but at some point that's going to dry up, and you're just preaching and you're advertising to the same people over and over and over again. And once they've read your book, they're not going to read it again. So going wide is probably a nice strategy to do after the Kindle Unlimited for sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Kindle Unlimited thing was a bit frustrating because I started wide, because then I had to yank everything out of the other stores in order to try the Kindle Unlimited thing, and then thought, oh, this is working pretty well. And then after about a year or so, it starts to dry up. You're like, oh, now I have to go through all the work again, putting everything back in all the other stores, and it's a lot of work. And I don't know that I want to say I regret having tried it. I think it's good that I went down that path and tried it out. But boy, it was a lot of extra work for myself in the end, and not something I plan on experimenting with anytime soon anyway. But I went wide again about a year ago, and I think there were definitely people who weren't picking up the books because they weren't on whatever platform they happen to prefer. So
yeah.
So there was a little bit of a bump throughout the year last year.
It's tricky, it's very hard to know where you're going to get the best return. It is gambling. You just never really know what the answer will be. And we have We have JD Estrada, who is a fellow author of almost any genre you could want to read. And he says, I'm considering getting out of KDP Unlimited. Can't say I've seen a major benefit. And then he also says, curious that Unlimited is kind of limited from the author side, which it is. I think they just named it that to attract readers, of course, but for us, exactly as you say, JD, it's extremely limiting, and it is difficult in exactly the way you said, Josh, where then you have to format everything and put it back out, and especially if you pulled things from wide, that is very frustrating. Oh, I hate that.
It really is, and I think too, Kindle Unlimited, it really depends on your genre, right? Like that is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Like the romance genre seems to be anyway huge on Kindle Unlimited, whereas something like what I write, that sort of sci-fi fantasy type stuff, is a little bit more hit and miss. And there are authors that have had success in that genre. Drew Hayes, that I was talking about earlier, is one of them. He's got some of his books in Kindle Unlimited, some of them not. He pulls them in and out all the time. I don't know what his calculus is for it, but he seems to do really pretty well in Kindle Unlimited, and that's great. If it works for you, more power to you. I found that it worked for me for a while, and then stopped working. So it's gonna, your mileage is going to vary, I think, depending on your fan base, depending on the genre you write in, depending on just so many factors. And it's a little bit frustrating that Amazon makes it as difficult as they do. I wish that you could do Kindle Unlimited without the exclusivity, even if maybe you had to make some other concession. The exclusivity, I think, makes it really hard for a lot of authors to know what to do and to decide what to do.
I totally agree. Why can't there be some other kind of concession, like you said, even if it was like we have to have some kind of special version that you can't put anywhere? Like, let's say it was a book club version and you can't put the book club version elsewhere, but you can put the plain, version. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways they could probably manage to have something special for themselves, but allow us to go wide at the same time.
Right. Exactly. And the way that Audible deals with this, which is not the best either, but is they cut your royalty if you're not exclusive, and it's like, all right, well, they could, Amazon could do something like that. Not that you're getting a ton from Kindle Unlimited either. I suppose it'd be hard to cut that down too much further than where it is, but something, they could do something else, I think.
I think it would be a lot more lucrative for most of the indie authors, for sure. So getting beyond that, I also noticed that you host and participate several podcasts. And so what are they about, and how are they different from one another? If you're doing more than one, what is the difference between them?
Well, I do fewer podcasts than I used to, but the main show that I'm still doing a lot now is called Masters Cast, which is a Masters of the Universe fan podcast. I grew up a fan of Masters of the Universe, which was a cartoon, comic book, toy line property that if you're old enough, you probably remember, and if you're not, you probably don't. But
Richard is waving at you.
I remember.
So I grew up with that, huge fan of it, and I've been part of that fan community for 25 years now, online, I think, at least. And I got to work actually on some of the things that have come out for that series. Dark Horse Comics a few years ago did a character guide and world compendium, and which is basically a big encyclopedia of all the characters and things from the series, and locations and items and different kinds of magic and all kinds of things from the series. And I got to work on that, and that was a lot of fun. And so the fan podcast is a thing that we've been doing since 2005. Me and my co-hosts, and it's just a fun thing to talk about the series, and there's new stuff going on with that all the time. There's a new cartoon produced by Kevin Smith coming out on Netflix in a couple of months, and that's going to be fun. And it's a fun property, and I mean it is why I have the love of fantasy that I do. Is growing up with that series. I watched it as a kid. I saw that series before I lost my vision. That series was on TV, and I loved it. And lost my vision when I was 6 years old. And remember, I remember the show. I remember how everything looked, and that's part of my love for the series that's carried on through the years is the fact that it's connected in with my memories of being able to see and that sort of thing. And when I lost my vision, the producers of the show actually got the two main actors in the show to record in character a message that they sent to me, which was a lot of fun
Wow.
back in 1983. So that's a long time ago, 84, I guess.
It's awesome.
And so I've got a lot of nostalgia, a lot of love for the series and the people that worked on the series. And actually also because of all that, because of the producers creating that cassette tape where they recorded for me a message and wishing me well and everything after I lost my vision. Because of all of that, I actually ended up being interviewed on the DVD releases back in the mid 2000s. If you can find the original DVD releases of the series, I am in quite a few of the documentaries throughout that thing on the extras. So it's been a huge part of my life. Still is a huge part of my life. I collect the action figures. I watch the shows. I talk about it on a podcast. I am a complete nerd, and I'm okay with that. So
That is
Where do
great.
people find this podcast? What would they do?
what's that?
Where would people find the podcast?
Masterscast.com is where the podcast is. We record pretty irregularly. It depends on what's going on in the property. So the She-Ra side of it had a new series on Netflix. So we watched that and discussed that a lot in the show, and that ended last year. And when the new series on Netflix that Kevin Smith is doing gets going, we'll be doing more episodes, I'm sure. Sure then.
So, for other people, other writers who may also be visually impaired, can you tell them what software you use to write and maybe even to blog, whatever is easiest to work with? Because that could really help them move forward in a much smoother way.
Sure. So I'm an Apple guy. I think I said that earlier. I use Macs and iPads and iPhones and all that stuff. And Apple's accessibility in general is really great. And I've been a fan of all of their work in the accessibility realm for a long time. They've got a built-in screen reader on everything they make. And so I use Scrivener for my writing, which a tool a lot of authors use. I mainly do the actual writing on the iPad version of Scrivener, and which you can sync with your Mac version. And then when it's time to really nail down the formatting, get the ebooks ready. A lot of the editing, a lot of that stuff takes place on the Mac, but the initial draft I do on the iPad version. And Literature and Latte, the company that makes it, has been just fantastic in terms of supporting accessibility in the app. And even when I ran into years ago, I told the story a few places, but a few years ago, when I was first working on Haven Lost, the first book in the series, and I ran into a feature in the app that I couldn't access, couldn't the screen reader could not see it, tell me about it, couldn't use it, and I contacted them. They gave me a workaround, not only a workaround to solve the problem so I could use the feature without without it working in the app, but gave me the instructions for going through all of that from the perspective of a blind user using the screen reader on the Mac that I was using. What screen reader commands I needed to use to do what. And I'm a pretty advanced user, so I didn't need all that, but I really appreciated the fact that they cared enough to know how to use the screen reader and explain what what I needed to do. And just for other users out there that maybe not used to going in and editing XML files, which is what you had to do to get around this problem. That would be incredibly helpful. So just the fact that they cared enough was pretty outstanding. So they I cannot say enough good things about Literature and Latte and Scrivener, and even the app in general is just really good. It's a incredibly powerful app. It's incredibly complicated. It definitely has a learning curve, but I don't know how I would do what I do without it. So
I think I started using it once you told me about it. I think you were the one who got me started with it, and I never looked back, honestly, because it made such a huge difference to my writing process. As you say, it just has a million things you can do, and I am definitely not at the level of using it that you are. You know a lot about it that I don't. You know all the secret Easter eggs and stuff, and I don't actually know all that stuff. I do sometimes pop into courses and learn more, but I write out of order, and it was really the only way that I could feel like I could keep writing out of order without having to reorganize in Word. It was very difficult for me, and it really ruined my process. I was finding it very hard for long works. So, Scrivener, I agree with you. I can't say enough about it. And from your perspective, from my perspective, it is just a really awesome software.
One of my favorite features in there, just to take a real short side trip here, one of my favorite features in there for what I'm doing with my book series, with the Dragon's Fruit Cycle, there's been a tremendous amount of research that I've done over the years, or things that I've wanted to refer back to. And one of the things that is great is you can take, if you've got like a web page, like there's information on this web page or this Wikipedia page or whatever it is that I know I'm going to need to refer to as I'm writing. You can actually add those into your Scrivener project in their entirety, and you don't even have to leave Scrivener to jump back to the web page and look up something while you're writing, which is just fantastic. I love that feature, and it has probably saved me countless hours over the years.
Yeah, I started using that too, and it also helps me. I totally agree. And they had this other feature, and I don't know if they had it before Scrivener 3, I can't remember, but well, at least I didn't know about it. Something where it will highlight any like form of grammar or language that you want. So like you could say, for example, show me all the verbs, and it will just highlight all of those. And, maybe in the accessibility version, it would read them to you or something like that. So you can see if you're overusing something. And that does make it easier. It is surprising when you overuse things and you just don't catch it in the reread. You're just not hearing it, or if you're reading it out loud, or you're just not seeing it if you're reading it on the screen. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I tell you, nothing will let you know that you are overusing a word or a phrase or whatever than listening to someone else narrate your audiobook. Let me just say that. So there have been a few times I've been, oh man, I really wish I could just go change this one phrase in book 2, because I just one too many times in this chapter I used that phrase. But in general, yeah, that's got to be a great tool. I'm gonna have to see how that works, because I haven't used that particular one. I have used the one that gives you, there's I forget, I think it's in the stats window, where it'll actually just give you every word that you've used in the book and the number of times you've used it, and it's just a giant list that you could scroll through. See, so which is kind of an interesting thing, and you can definitely see things that you may be overusing.
I didn't realize that. Now I have something to look up too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I actually have a list that I have written down on Microsoft Word, and I go through my book and try to see how many times I've used certain words and try to get rid of them, weak words or whatever. Sometimes I keep the weak words. See JD Estrada use the word just. I don't use just very often, but every now and then, it is a word and it's there for a reason. And every now and then, to use just works. It just works. So, you know, there's not a golden rule for everything, but just moderation, I think, with a lot of these things. But anyway, I think we're near the end of our podcast, or not our podcast, our video cast. You got me on podcast now. So I would like to thank you for joining us today, and we really enjoyed hearing about your books and your journey. And it's amazing that you're able to write even with the disability. That's awesome, and we would commend you for that.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
It's always great talking to you.
And just on a note for Christie, I'm not sure if you have anything new you want to add today or this week, or you've got anything special coming up?
No, just that The Artist is coming out on March 30th, so we are less than half a month away, and I'm really looking forward to that. That one is wide, so you can buy it from anywhere, and I'm really looking forward to seeing readers' feedback. I already have a review on Goodreads, so you can check that out to see what people think so far, and I'm really excited for that one. It's taken longer than I had hoped, but boy, has the journey been worth it. It's really been fun.
Awesome. I hope you do very well with it. And I've got my audiobook, Into the Madness. It's the third one, the Soul Forge Saga. It is in Audible's hands right now. And Mikhail Roberts, who's actually going to be here in, I think, April 20th, he's going to be on with us. And so we'll get to chat with my narrator. He does an amazing job. His voices are incredible. So we're just waiting on Audible to release it. Hopefully it'll be before the end of March. So next week, join us again on March 23rd as we switch it up a bit. And we speak with science fiction and fantasy author Allegra Pescatore, who I inadvertently used her picture when I was trying to advertise this segment today. And I apologize to both Josh and Allegra. My wife came in and fixed it after Christie showed us. And and she would love to talk about disability representation in genre fiction. So that sounds like it should be very interesting to hear that spin on it. And I'm looking forward to hearing that. So until then, this has been another Lurking for Legends live video cast. And as always, thank you to my wonderful co-host, Christie Stratos, and our guest, fantasy author Josh de Lioncourt. Thank you for being with us tonight. And until we meet again, take care and please keep safe.